Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are looking at the BRSS MT2W Metal Zone Waza craft. And this is, I think, maybe the greatest redemption story in guitar pedal history.
I think you might be right. I mean, we're talking about a pedal that for decades was the definition of high gain aggression, but also, noise, harshness, just chaos in a box.
All sonic chaos.
Exactly. And the original MT2, it's not just a pedal, it's like a cultural thing. It has this split reputation. You see it used by huge names in metal, but it's also famous for being, well, almost impossible for a lot of players to dial in.
Right. So our mission today is to really unpack how the 2018 Waza redesign pulled off what seemed impossible.
Yeah, how they addressed every single one of those criticisms, the noise, the harshness, while somehow keeping that crushing metal zone DNA at its core.
And what's so interesting is that they didn't just clean it up and make it tame. They rebuilt the whole engine from the ground up.
That's the key insight, really. The MT2W isn't just one pedal. It's basically two high-gain amps in a box. You get a perfected version of the classic and then a totally new boutique-style gain engine.
Okay, so before we get to the Waza magic, let's revisit that drama. Why was the original MT2 so polarizing? It had more saturation than anything else at the time, so why all the eye rolls for, 30 years?
Well, it was a perfect storm of three things, really, and user error made them all worse. First, it was just so noisy.
Ridiculously noisy.
Yeah, the components they were using back then, the noise floor was just way too high for that much gain. Yeah. And second, it was harsh. It had that ice pick high end that guitarists talk about. Especially when you scoop the mids, it can make a clean amp sound just awful.
And the third problem was actually its biggest selling point, wasn't it? That super powerful EQ.
Exactly. That EQ was a massive double-edged sword. Beginners would just crank the bass and treble and turn the middle all the way down, for that death metal sound.
The classic scoop.
The classic scoop, but they just filter out all the frequencies that let the guitar actually be heard in a band. It was almost too powerful for its own good.
So BOSS hears this for decades and finally decides to put their Waza craft team on it. For anyone who doesn't know, Waza is their premium Japanese engineering line.
Yes.
How did they actually use that philosophy to fix those specific problems, starting with the noise?
They knew they couldn't just change one part. I mean, they went back to the fundamental architecture. It's still a fully analog signal path, but the upgrades are huge. For the noise, it really started with improving the op-amp selection.
Okay, let's touch on that for a second. Why are op-amps, the operational amplifiers, so important in a distortion pedal?
You can think of them as the little engines that drive the game. They boost the signal and do the first bit of shaping.
Right.
If you use cheap ones, they introduce their own electronic hiss before the signal even gets distorted. So by using premium, low-noise op-amps, the MT2W starts with a really pristine foundation. It lowers that noise floor before the crazy high-gain part even happens.
That makes perfect sense. Less noise going in means less noise getting amplified. So what about the harshness, that ice pick sound?
That really comes down to the clipping architecture. Distortion is basically just shaving off the peaks of your guitar's sound wave. The MT2W has a much more refined clipping circuit, so it kind of rolls off those really abrasive high frequencies.
So it's a smoother, more musical kind of saturation.
Exactly. They got rid of the harshness without losing any of the intensity. It was a really clever redesign.
And even with that total overhaul, they kept the controls exactly the same. Level, distortion, and the 4 EQ knobs.
Yep, completely familiar. And it still has the buffered bypass, which is standard for BISS. And that's actually really useful when you're running a ton of gain and long cables. It keeps your signal strong even when the pedal's off.
Okay, let's unpack this. The real genius here is that little mode switch. It splits the pedal into two totally separate analog circuits. Let's start with Mode S standard mode. You said it's the perfected classic. Does it lose that raw energy people liked?
Not at all.
Yeah.
That's the key. It keeps the aggression, but gets rid of all the bad stuff, the artifacts. Mode S is that sound you remember, just polished.
How so?
If you put it next to an original, you hear it immediately. The high end is way smoother, no more of that abrasive buzz. And the bass is so much tighter, it doesn't get all flubby when you palm mute.
That tight bass is everything for modern metal, right? You need that definition.
Absolutely.
Right. And
maybe the most important thing is the mid-range is just more usable. Even when you scoop it, your tone doesn't just vanish from the mix like it used to.
Mode S is for that classic 90s thrash sound, or maybe some Swedish death metal, but without fighting the pedal the whole time.
That's it. It's the definitive low-noise version of that sound.
Yeah.
But then you flip the switch to C mode.
And this is where it gets really interesting. Because this isn't just a small change.
No, C mode, or custom mode, is a completely new thing. This is BOSS going right after the boutique high-gain amp market. It stops feeling like a pedal and starts feeling like the front end of a really expensive tube amp.
What are the tonal differences that make it feel so much more premium?
Okay, so where S mode is a bit compressed and aggressive on top, C mode is thicker, it's warmer, and it has so much more body in the mid-range, it just sounds fuller. And crucially, it's way less compressed, so it has a better dynamic response. You can actually hear the difference when you pick lightly versus digging in.
It sounds like it has more air around the notes, kind of like how a big speaker cabinet moves sound around a room.
That's a perfect way to put it. It's articulate. For modern prog or metal, where you have these complex chords, C mode is fantastic because the notes don't just turn into a wall of mud.
And it takes other pedals really well, doesn't it? Stacking high-gain pedals can be a nightmare.
It's made for it. Because C mode is already so full and open, it acts like a clean amp. You can hit the front of it with an overdrive, like a tube screamer with the gain down, to tighten it up even more and just push it into total destruction without it falling apart.
We absolutely have to talk about the EQ. It's the defining feature of the Metal Zone legacy. I mean, we've said it was polarizing, but it's probably one of the most powerful EQs ever put in a stomp box.
It is the engine of the whole thing. The key is understanding how it all works together. You have your low and high shelves, and they give you a massive plus or minus 15 dB bowl, boost, or cut.
Which is a huge amount of shaping power right there.
A ton. But the magic is in those two middle knobs.
The mid and mid-freak.
Correct. The middle knob boosts or cuts, but that mid-freak knob lets you sweep through the entire mid-range from about 200 hertz all the way up to 5 kilohertz. That is surgical precision. You're basically deciding exactly where the voice of the pedal is going to live.
So you're not just boosting mids, you're finding that one specific frequency, say at 1.5 kilohertz, that makes your lead tone just cut through everything else.
That is the power. And that flexibility is what lets the MT2W become a chameleon.
Yeah.
Because most high-gain amps, like a Marshall or a rectifier, have their own built-in mid-range character you can't change. Right. With this pedal, you can just mimic those characteristics yourself.
So let's break that down. If you're trying to dial in a recto sound, what are you actually doing with that EQ?
You're going for that big, deep, low-end thump, and then you're using the mid-freak to find the low mids and pulling them way down. It's that classic American metal sound, all weight and scooped aggression.
And what about something like a 5150?
For a 5150 sound, you'd be looking for a hump in the high mids, maybe around 2.5 kilohertz. You boost that, and you get that incredible pick attack and clarity for really fast riffing.
And a classic Marshall JCM.
That's a bit warmer, a more present mid-range profile, not as extreme of a scoop, gives you that British rock bark. The fact that this one pedal can do all of that just speaks volumes about the EQ, especially now that the circuit itself is clean enough to handle it.
Which explains why engineers have loved the original for so long. It was always a secret weapon in the studio, sometimes just used as an EQ.
Exactly. And now you get that legendary EQ paired with a circuit that's quiet and has all this fidelity. Yeah. It's an unbeatable combo.
So let's talk about practical application. We know it does metal. What else can you do with this thing?
Well, beyond the obvious genres, it's just a fantastic lead guitar pedal for any kind of heavy music. That sustain and mid-control means your solos will always sing, but you can also get some really cool alternative or industrial sounds out of it by using the EQ to get these extreme, almost machine-like tones.
And it has a really interesting use in modern recording, right?
Yeah.
With direct-in stuff.
Oh, that's a key point. It excels at direct recording into an interface because you're sending a real complex analog high-gain signal into your software. It sounds way more three-dimensional than just using a plug-in distortion. You feed this into a good speaker impulse response, and it sounds massive.
So if we had to summarize the whole deep dive, what are the, say, 3 big reasons that MT2W is just so much better than the original?
Okay, first, it's the engineering. You get 2 complete high-quality analog circuits in one pedal. Second, the sound itself is just fundamentally bedless noise, more warmth, more clarity.
And
Third, it's that legendary EQ, finally paired with a circuit that's clean enough to let you use its full power without compromise.
But it is still a Metal Zone. We should probably give some advice for anyone thinking about adding this to their rig.
For sure.
Yeah.
The first thing is to know what it's not. This is not a subtle overdrive. It is not for blues. It is an aggressive, high-gain box, full stop. Second, that EQ requires some discipline. You can still scoop yourself into oblivion if you're not careful.
And the golden rule of high-gain pedals still applies. What you plug it into matters.
Absolutely critical. This pedal wants to run into a completely clean amp. Think of it as a preamp. If you run this into an amp that's already breaking up, it's just going to turn into a muddy, uncontrollable mess.
Right. You use it to create your distortion, not boost an existing one.
Precisely.
In the end, that Waza Craft badge on it isn't just marketing. They really delivered.
They really did.
Yeah.
The MT2W completely rehabilitated the reputation of a legendary but misunderstood pedal. It proved what that circuit could always have been with better engineering. It went from a beginner's mistake to a legitimate professional tool.
It really is the metal zone perfected.
And that's the takeaway. It's this incredible showcase of versatility that's achieved through smart, low-noise design and that unmatched EQ. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the MT2W proves that even the most controversial gear can become a professional workhorse if you just get the science right.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you to chew on. Considering the MT2W can so accurately mimic the sound of huge, expensive amp stacks just by using its EQ, how much of the sound of high gain is actually in the core distortion circuit, and how much is just controlled by the simple surgical power of a sweepable mid-range? Think about that next time you're dialing in your tone.